Amid the fairy tale spires and fantasy turrets of Middle Europe, Boris Johnson received what the European Commission regards as a cold dose of reality. Over the weekend, the Prime Minister had likened himself to the Incredible Hulk, throwing off the manacles of EU membership, and he said there were real signs of movement on the Northern Irish backstop. But here, for his first meeting with the outgoing Commission President, Mr Johnson toned his optimism down even before it collided with a polite but firm message from Jean-Claude Juncker.
Boris, sorry, we have to pay attention again. Come on. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Why are you so optimistic, Mr Johnson?
Well, we're cautious.
Cautiously optimistic.
Thank you.
Over lunch, the Prime Minister was yet again told it was up to the UK to come up with a legally workable solution to the Irish border issue that was compatible with the current withdrawal agreement. And the Commission said in a statement later, such a proposal had still not been made. Afterwards, Mr Johnson was booed by protesters, many of them British.
Prime Minister, was there any progress today?
Still, his officials called the meeting constructive, and Mr Juncker had been left in no doubt that the UK was leaving on October the 31st. The British say the contours of a deal are clear. The Europeans complain that there is still no content. With just a month till the critical European Council summit, the only real agreement here was that negotiations should soon become a daily event.
In English, sir, was there any progress today?
The negotiations will continue at a higher level and with higher speed.
Have you seen concrete proposals, written down proposals from the British?
The Commission President didn't answer that. But the British say there is a serious plan, which Michel Barnier, the chief negotiator, should engage with now, even though it may not be published before the UN General Assembly begins next week. At the offices of Luxembourg's Prime Minister, the jeering from some 75 demonstrators outside intensified. And when the two Prime Ministers emerged, Boris Johnson bypassed the planned press conference in this courtyard, complaining that the noise would have drowned him out, which it almost certainly would have done, leaving Xavier Bettel gesticulating at an empty podium with the Union Jack still in place.
I wanted to thank Mr. Johnson, who was here today, for the exchange that we had. We need more than just words. We need a legally operable text to work on as soon as possible if we want to meet the October deadline. You can't hold a future hostage for party political gains. So now it's on Mr. Johnson. He holds the future of all UK citizens, and every EU citizen living in the UK in his hands.
It was a public and unprecedented humiliation of his absent guest. Though afterwards, Mr Johnson repeated that there was a good chance of a Brexit deal if only the Northern Irish backstop was scrapped.
But if we can get that done, as I've said before, then we're at the races. And I think we've got actually just the right amount of time to do a deal between now and the 17th, 18th of October. But as I never tire of telling you, if we can't do a deal by then, and obviously we want to work very hard to do it, if we can't do it by then we'll make sure that we can come out on the 31st of October, deal or no deal.
Just the right amount of time to do a deal, he says. But there was no apparent bridge to one forged here today. That prize still beyond grasp. Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News, Luxembourg.
The Prime Minister is back in Downing Street now. Our political correspondent Paul McNamara is there. Paul, the latest.
Yes, well, the Prime Minister arrived back a little while ago through the back doors, and by that moment, the blame game was already well underway. A number 10 source telling us that they asked repeatedly to move the press conference inside. There was a press centre there where the Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, did a press conference from in his last trip to Luxembourg, but the government of Luxembourg just weren't playing ball. government of Luxembourg put out a statement today saying we would have preferred a joint press conference and there was no reason not to do one. The request to move one inside came too late and there was not enough space inside, so the only option for logistical purpose was to hold it outside. Look, I think what you got a real sense of today is that the Prime Minister of Luxembourg was relishing this moment. We were told at the start of the day that this would be mainly statements. There'd be no time for any questions. He not only made a statement, he took lots of questions and really relished the moment. And ultimately, Boris Johnson is ending today with this being the talking point and not his plans for Brexit. And that is not going to be what he hoped for come the end of today.
Paul McNamara in Downing Street. Fatima.
Thanks, John. Now, after getting her party's support for a pledge to cancel Brexit altogether, the Lib Dem leader Jo Swinson has declared she wouldn't enter into a coalition with Labour or the Conservatives if there was a hung parliament after a general election. She says neither Boris Johnson nor Jeremy Corbyn are fit for the top job. Well, our political editor Gary Gibbon is at the Lib Dem conference in Bournemouth. Gary, what have you been hearing today?
Well, while Boris Johnson believes the future of the Conservative Party is dependent on delivering Brexit, here they think the future of their party is dependent on owning the Remain brand. And what the big event that has happened here in terms of policy initiative is that Jo Swinson, as the new leader, has doubled down on policy on Remain and said that this is now the party of revoke. If the Lib Dems were to win a general election, that's what they would do. They think that is the way to grow their vote. It looks, when you talk to Lib Dem strategists, as though there are signs that it is growing in certain areas, but maybe coming down a bit in other areas because of this approach. Rural areas maybe suffering a bit, not advancing, whereas there could be some advance in some metropolitan, some urban areas. You're also hearing here, talking to strategists, that there's a concern that maybe they're putting all their eggs in one basket. A huge chunk of the membership have joined since Brexit. Is there a danger it becomes a single issue party? Is there a danger that if Brexit were to happen, the bubble that they're enjoying at the moment might just burst? But for the moment, the party is totally focused on trying to stop Brexit happening, and also entertaining the new arrivals that have come from other political parties. There's some flash photography in the report that follows.
The man who led the way, the first of those MPs to cross the floor to join our party this summer. Conference, please welcome Chuka Umunna.
The Liberal Democrats gave a prime speaking spot for the first in the recent wave of defectors.
Now, I've been to a few parties, and I hope you don't mind me saying this and sounding immodest to say that when I made the decision to join this party, given my experience so far, this has been one of the best political decisions I've ever made since going into politics.
He was embraced by leaders present and past.
Thank you.
Paddy Ashdown's widow said he'd be proud.
Well, he is an inspiration.
Rarely can a political switcher have been absorbed and promoted so fast.
Well, you've got to have the yellow, haven't you?
Absolutely, being on message.
I've got the family colours.
Some Lib Dems wanted assurances that the new arrivals had been properly checked out.
Warm welcome from everyone, or some people sizing you up and just trying to work out whether you're a true believer?
Well, I'm sure that they may be, but all I've had, to be honest, is a very, very warm welcome.
The Chief Whip's tried to reassure Lib Dems that he interviews all potential defectors before they're allowed to join up.
As Chief Whip, of course, it's up to me to make sure that it's done properly and professionally.
You'd take anyone, wouldn't you?
We have conversations with lots of people that go nowhere.
One of the new arrivals had 2 meetings today with Lib Dem activists unhappy that he had abstained in the Commons vote on same-sex marriage and had supported HIV checks on those settling in the UK.
So do you think you've calmed people down on both these issues, whether people with HIV should come to the country and gay marriage?
I think that this is going to be an ongoing conversation because of, unfortunately, the way in which it's been stirred up by, interestingly, the extreme left and the extreme right.
The party's new leader won conference backing yesterday for her first big policy move.
Getting in the car.
Jo Swinson committed the Lib Dems to revoking or abandoning Brexit altogether if the party wins the next general election.
Oh yeah, look, yeah, it works. It works.
I feel we are opening ourselves up to similar accusations that we've been making against other people.
You look like the Brexit party of the middle ground, suddenly.
Well, yes, quite, exactly.
The Lib Dems' anti-Brexit branding is boosting support. Some wonder if the party risks becoming a single-issue campaign that would be at great risk if Brexit happened sometime soon.
If it happened, couldn't the bubble burst quite quickly?
I've thought about that, and I thought about whether a bubble burst could happen in the short term, and it could do to some extent.
Great stuff.
Tomorrow, Jo Swinson will tell the party faithful she's ready for number 10. Even in these turbulent times, a bold line for a Lib Dem leader to deliver.
Well, earlier I spoke to Jo Swinson and asked her about that big policy initiative of the week. If the Lib Dems win a general election, they would revoke Article 50 and effectively rip up the result of the referendum. You said if we want to be a party of government, we need to speak to the whole country, no matter how people voted 3 years ago. You've given up on that?
Not at all. I think we do need to speak to the whole country. There is a whole host of problems that our country is facing where we have strong solutions to deal with them.
How do you get a hearing from Leave voters if you say you're ready to bin their vote?
We're being straightforward about what we think is the best future for our country. I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone that the Liberal Democrats want to stop Brexit. We've been saying it very clearly for months.
And that's not very liberal, some people in this party feel.
I think it's about giving people a choice and about saying if you think that this Brexit is, costing more than you thought it would and taking longer than you were told it would and actually looks quite different to what was put to you back in 2016, then you've got the chance to stop it. Liberal Democrats will, if elected as a majority government, revoke Article 50.
You're not a big fan. You're an avowed critic of our electoral system. You could. A party can come to power with a puny percentage of the vote and overturn 52% who voted for Leave. Where's the justice in that?
Of course, I want to. Of course, I want to change our electoral system, and I will continue arguing to change our electoral system.
Quite happily use it as a weapon to beat these Leavers over the head if you happen to win.
It is the system that we have. And if the Liberal Democrats win a majority under this system, then I think that will be a pretty clear mandate for us to stop Brexit.
It's a dodgy mandate according to the Liberal Democrats' creed, which is that this is a busted flush of a system. But you'd be using it. It doesn't seem very liberal.
Look, if we end up with an election being the only way that people can have their say, then of course we need to make sure there is a clear choice for people at that election.
A couple of quotes have popped up in the last 24 hours. We heard Sir Norman Lamb this morning talking about how he was worried that it was polarisation and you're playing with fire. Jo Cox's partner, widower, said that it was polarisation. You can't overturn a majority in the referendum with a vote in a general election. Does it not worry you, these voices being raised against this idea?
I appreciate that not everybody agrees with it, and we had a debate in our conference hall,
But
which
they're saying
was
it's
a lively
extremist
debate.
and it's divisive.
I think it's being clear and honest about where we stand, and I think it is about giving people that choice. It is our duty to make sure that they have the chance in a general election to choose to stop Brexit.
Isn't the truth here you're a bit worried that Labour, who've been on a bit of a journey, might just travel a bit more on that journey towards Remain? You won't have exclusive political terrain all to yourself, so you've just decided to outflank them and damn the principles.
I am not worried about Labour because Labour have been all over the place and continue to be all over the place. The only reason I'm worried about Labour is because they have been failing our country in the way in which they have vacated the space, totally failing in their duty as the official opposition.
Some people actually think that there were some priorities that made them vote Leave that weren't just to do with the things you're talking about, the trade figures, maybe even the national income. They actually made a choice for different reasons. You're telling them not just that you're going to bin that, but that they made it for the wrong reasons and you know better.
People, of course, voted on both sides of the referendum in 2016 for a whole host of different factors. And like any vote, there's a complex series of factors involved. But I do believe in our future in the European Union. I recognise that there are other people who take a genuinely held different approach, and I respect that. But I want to give people the choice.
They might be scratching their heads feeling you don't respect it at all.
I don't agree with it, but I recognise their strength of feeling.
Some people have been scratching their heads trying to work out how the Tory party, all these people who supported Tory austerity measures and the rest of it, is now saying, let's turn the taps on, don't need austerity anymore. Are you in the same position as them? They haven't apologised for austerity, they haven't said it was wrong. Was it wrong? Are you going to apologise for it? Is it just switch the taps on and pretend it didn't happen?
Well, I mean, I think the problems with the Conservatives' current plans is there's no detail about how they're going to pay for them, and they're, suggesting they're going to have a magic money tree.
So you think austerity should carry on?
No. Well, what I'm saying, sometimes it's about making tough choices and about recognising where you need to make taxation decisions as well as spending decisions. And we will be straightforward and set out our plans at the forthcoming election whenever it is upon us. But I have been clear that there's things that we shouldn't have allowed through in the coalition government, and I think we have to learn from that experience and act differently in the future on particular issues. The bedroom tax would be a good example where I've already said I don't think we should let that through, and we've learned from that experience.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.